Hey everyone, Sal here, coming in a little bit late with this video. Day of League is when it'll go up, or the event start rather, for Phrecia in 327. Been kind of busy, haven't had a whole lot of time to think about things or plan out a build. This probably isn't the build I'll be playing, but I wanted to make a video on it since I did play it last event and had a lot of fun with it and found it pretty successful. Met or exceeded my expectations for the build. And yeah, what we're talking about today is Toxic Rain Bog Shaman. Now, the big draw here is Toad Pact, primarily, actually. And the reason for that is every positive stat on here synergizes well with Toxic Rain. Projectile speed, the projectiles fall more quickly. Get your skill dealing damage slightly more quickly there. It's kind of a minor point. Skill effect duration used to be 50%, now 75 for all of these values. Resistance penalty used to be minus 20, now minus 40. Skill effect duration is huge though. With no other skill effect duration increases, this is 75% more damage for Toxic Rain. Now you'll get a couple incidentally, but what you usually do is pick up a duration cluster as Toxic Rain, and you can just completely skip that, save yourself a lot of points by doing so, and you will get some other skill effect duration incidentally. So it's not quite 75%, but it's more like 30, 35-ish, I believe, which again, still pretty significant. Also got this node Pandemic here for 40% more damage over time. Drawback of losing life, 5% per second if you've been hit recently. In the previous iteration of the build, what I did was this node gave you reservation efficiency for curse skills. So I ran a Blasphemy and Feeble, and then I ran Rotten Core, which makes your skills deal physical damage to you. And I was using a Duresso's Defiance body armor to hit myself and grant myself a 100% increased effect onslaught, 40% attack speed, 40% movement speed, is functionally what this was in conjunction with my body armor. We're not doing that this time around. So instead, we're going to Sanguine Power to convert our energy shield to life. And the reason for that is the tree is really good at spitting out gear that has a lot of similar tags in either the prefix or suffix slots. So in this case, you'll use the Genesis tree to make a bunch of energy shield armor. You can recombinate as well if that's up your alley, but the basic gear is going to come from the tree or the recombination bases. Synergizes nicely with the change nodes here to give you max life. Also get a bit of chaos res, kind of helps make up for the loss of Ellie res on Toad Pact, although it is a lot of Ellie res to lose. So that's the Ascendancy. General skill setup. Because Vile Imprecations was changed to give you an additional curse instead of giving you reservation efficiency on curse skills, we need to run a 2-curse setup, or want to, rather. So I opted to go for a Manaforged Hex Touch setup with that. Hex Touch does have a downside of less effect of supported curses. So you could theoretically swap this out if you wanted to for something like either manual cursing, because you have so much duration. You'll have like 20-second curses, which is going to be fine to self-cast. Or you can set up a, what's it called, Arcanist Brand. And yeah, that would actually improve the damage quite a bit in a bossing scenario if you wanted to self-cast Despair specifically. Enfeeble is nice to have on the Manaforged Arrows Hex Touch setup, though. This is more of a mapping focus setup, again. And you could either pull out Despair, Enfeeble, or both. The Hex Touch setup does get a little more interesting if you have more curses, if you want to fit in a third here with Whispers of Doom. The curse options aren't really that good, though. You could, I guess, run a Punishment if you wanted to. We're already increasing the damage enemies take via Wither, though, so that's not getting the full effectiveness there. It's not going to be as strong as the other curses, and so for that reason, I'm leaving it out for now. Outside of that, I've got a couple of I've got one skill set up here showing everything. You can use more duration for Toxic Rain. I probably wouldn't recommend it. It's going to be a little long as it is, especially once you get quality. And personally, last event I ran Conk Effect. I would definitely try this out, see how it feels. There are some conventional rules around how much area of effect you want for Toxic Rain. And my advice is to just completely forget about those because 75% AoE is too much to try to compensate for and get the perfect breakpoints. And there's an additional reason not to care about that, which is you really only have to worry about the AoE of Toxic Rain on single targets if you are fighting one big boss enemy in the middle of an open area. Eater and Exarch are a little bit like that, since they are kind of in the middle of their arena a lot of the time. The Maven is not like that, famously. She loves teleporting around the edges to the edges of her arena, right? Which means your targeting area for Toxic Rain gets smaller, which means you're going to have more overlaps, especially when you have more AoE. So if you're doing a lot of indoor maps or fighting bosses specifically in more enclosed areas and not like super wide open spaces, the more AoE you have, the better. And the more AoE you have, the bigger of an acceptable area there is for that kind of gameplay. I hope that makes sense. If you have questions about it, let me know in the comments and I can explain it further. Finishing going over the skills here, though, it's mostly a bunch of Mana Forge setups, if I'm being honest. Also have one for Toxic Rain of Withering with a more duration setup. Frenzy in there because you got to fit it somewhere. Actually, did I tick Frenzy charges? Yes. Auras and movement skill. Period of Elements, Grace, and Malevolence. Not really sure about Grace. I'm not sure it's going to be all that useful. Probably run it early on just because while I'm still sorting out gear, but eventually you are going to want to use pure ES bases to go to life stacking single big hit with good recovery kind of defense instead of the avoidance defense using evasion. So I think eventually this gets swapped out for haste, which should shore up the damage a little bit as well. But early on, I'm going to run Grace. I'm always going to run Purity of Elements because of the resistance penalty, most likely. And I just like it as an easy solution to elemental ailments. But if you want to find another solution for that, or you don't care about potentially getting shocked, for example, and you have solved your resistances other ways, then yeah, definitely drop PoE for haste, probably, or potentially another defensive setup. You could fit in an Arctic Armor. You could maybe use Flesh and Stone, but it's kind of finicky. I'm not a huge fan of having to stand right next to things, personally. And Malevolent, of course, you want. This is massive because it scales both damage over time and skill effect duration. And just through my movement skill here as well. I also have a Withering Touch set up with Blast Rain and Storm Rain. I would probably change out the Storm Rain, depending on whether I keep the Hex Touch set up, wherever that is. Rain of Arrows of Saturation would be better for Withering Touch. Or just regular Rain of Arrows if you didn't want to farm the Transfigure gem. Otherwise, yeah, just making sure we've got decent uptime on our Wither stacks. And this is a good segue into my recovery. Focusing on life gain on hit. These 3 points here, this cluster is an average of 40 life gain on hit, which is pretty substantial. This is a very high hit rate build because we're focusing on a skill that uses multiple projectiles. It's going to hit multiple things, and multiple times each, you can hit an enemy with the falling projectiles and the pods bursting. On top of the Mana Forge setup and everything else. you have to trust me on the math, or if you want to do it yourself against the hit rate and accuracy and all that, it's about 1,000 life gained per target, accounting for accuracy and everything, which is really good. So bare minimum, like you'll get a 1,000 HP per second average against like a boss, with my current POB, that is. And don't trust this on hit rate here. It's not fully accurate because of POB things. But yeah, essentially what that means is if you are fighting a group of enemies, you should not die unless you get one shot. Because not only are we hitting frequently, it's all spaced out in such a way that even if you got stunned, for example, you're pretty likely to still be hitting things during the duration of your stun because you have spore pods going off, you have triggered arrows, Maniforged arrow setups that are causing things to fall and effects to go off, etc. So yeah, you can drop this cluster if you get a Vitality life gain on hit Watcher's Eye. You could also try to fit in more a life gain on hit support. I probably wouldn't though. Just easier to take the cluster. That applies to everything. And you really want a global source of life gain on hit to make sure you're sustaining. And that's one of the reasons I like the life stacking approach instead of just trying to fit in evasion. But the big takeaway there is accuracy is important because we have our life gain on hit setup and our withering touch happening. So don't invest a ton into your accuracy. Like 89% here is fine. And I've just taken this cluster here, this accuracy cluster, which also has attack speed, which is good. And I have a bow mastery for 100 accuracy per green gem, which is a massive boost. Takes me from 71 to 89% accuracy. You could also take this accuracy mastery here instead of or in addition to that, depending on your current setup. But again, about 89% is fine. And the life gain rate I talked about earlier was with that 89% in my calculation. So lastly, items here. Or I guess I'll talk about leveling too, but items. This is the bare minimum damage you're going to get single target, roughly 750k. I do have 15 wither stacks here because that should be likely given the duration on the withering pods from the transfigure gem, in addition to the withering touch setup, mana forge, full frenzy charges, of course, because we're using a mana forged frenzy setup, and 4 overlapping pods. It's possible you only get 3 of these, but again, I think in most of the relevant scenarios you'll have 4. And based on my damage in the previous event, I can tell you it felt more than sufficient. It was the highest feeling damage I had ever had for Toxic Rain that early on in my progression, up to like level 92. So as for leveling, I suppose, as my last point here, I guess I'll finish items. It's pretty it. Nothing else has damage. This should all be basic gear you can acquire from using the tree. A helmet and a body armor with energy shield on it. That's essentially it. You don't actually want to make them like this necessarily. You technically want life on your helmet, for example, and not a hybrid ES mod. And these are low bases as well, so 4,700 life here. You do want pure ES, no life on your Vol Regalia for the life mastery here. Or not a Vol Regalia, but your body armor in general. The quiver is just an attack speed quiver with crafted attack speed. The +2 bow, this is if you picked up a bow, threw an essence on it, crafted attack speed. This is about what you would have. So again, bare minimum here, little under a mil, which doesn't sound like a lot in this day and age. It kind of is, admittedly, nothing special, but certainly serviceable until you get some upgrades and whatnot. And again, basic resistance gear throughout the rest. I called this one late game tree gear. This one's a multi-crafted +3 bow. Throw in some dot multi there. Quiver is slightly better, once again. The biggest thing to gain here is you're going to get a lot more life as you get gear with higher ES, fill out the remainder of your resistances, etc. Again, like I mentioned earlier, potentially find a better solution for ailment immunity. And yeah, the rest is all still pretty basic, no anointment even, so easy ways to improve your damage depending on how you want to take it. And there is some room in the tree because I didn't spend time traveling over to exceptional performance here. You could fit in a cluster with that. I don't know if I'll end up farming cluster jewels. If I don't, I'd rather spend these last few points picking up like other damage nodes like this, for example, or I may pick up the stun avoidance here. This cluster is 60%, and these life nodes here are another 36%, so that's 96% stun avoidance. Could be pretty nice. Definitely some options out there, so kind of open to interpretation, kind of a general template of things. And leveling is going to be a little painful. If you want to level as Toxic Rain, perfectly fine. I would definitely mule it, unless you're okay with doing the library quest and then delaying your switch until that gem is leveled up a bit. I guess you could theoretically actually give it some XP during your lab run. If I play this build, maybe I'll do that. That sounds interesting, actually. But yeah, if you get this node, obviously the minus 40 resistance is huge to overcome after your first lab. But the AoE and the skill effect duration, it feels pretty smooth after that. Once you get the 40% more damage over time, you're cruising. And at that point, you shave your life gain on hit and everything, so the life loss isn't a big deal either. Yeah, so leveling is going to be a little bit painful early on. Definitely consider leveling as another skill entirely until like lab. If you want some amount of overlap at least, maybe you can run a damage over time skill, chaos dot skills even. But yeah, it's kind of a bullet to bite for the build. But I think if you're playing off meta, you might be a little bit used to that anyways. So yeah, this video ran on for longer than I thought it would, but I hope this was something to listen to or get an idea from on your way to the event later today. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Maybe in another build video, and maybe in a progress or general idle strategy video. Peace.